The financial crisis of 2008 began with a subprime crisis where home ownership became a way for the bankers to expand their use of derivatives. These weapons of mass destruction were elevated to never-before-seen levels. New creations hatched, and the eventual meltdown occurred. Today we find a double whammy of deflation with our real value of our income while simultaneously having certain assets pumped up in particular pockets to astronomical levels. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to talk about how real estate in certain areas has gone up dramatically. We have a deflation that's occurring in oil. We have a deflation, of course, within our real wages. And let's get into it right now, connect the dots, beginning with this. Chinese equities lost ground on Thursday, but the rest of Asia's markets delivered some last-minute Christmas cheer before the holiday period. There's always propaganda in the news, and it's definitely being seen with the financial news. What I would like to show you here is this paragraph, and to me it's so confusing. The way that they break things down, it really needs to be explained in a more simple terms. The recovery in oil prices lifted energy stocks in the region, with U.S. crude nearly 1% higher in Asia trade following a 4% rally overnight. Data on Wednesday showed U.S. crude inventories fell by 5.9 million barrels in the last week, compared with the expectations for an increase of 1.1 million barrels. So all of a sudden, you have this oil situation which just changed overnight. Millions of barrels. And right away, you have the price of oil changing. Now, this doesn't make an ounce of sense to me when you have such major fluctuations occurring, when we know that the true supply doesn't fluctuate that fast. It cannot do it in this way. What is it then? It's traders, bankers, technocrats, whatever you want to call it, all of those interconnected in some way, shape, or form with the financial industry who are making profit from this. That's what this is all about. Of course, there are deeper things going on here. There's a lot of talk about countries being involved in this, rationing their output and things like this. But the numbers we're provided on, in terms of the actual amount of oil that's out there, I don't believe it for a second. I'm sure you do, you have the same feelings as well. Canada may be struggling with the low oil prices, but China's latest environmental crisis is proving to be a lucrative opportunity for another of its natural resources, Rocky Mountain air. You may have seen this article already, but we're talking about air, the newest hot commodity. I can't believe it, but here we are. Alberta-based Vitality Air has been cashing in on Beijing's worsening air quality problems, selling aluminum cans of fresh, clean air and oxygen from the picturesque Rocky Mountains for around $10 to $20 each. And it wasn't as if, this is something that was slow to pick up and everything. They actually sold 500 bottles at first, and immediately they were gone off the shelves. So they ordered another 700, and they are ready to go as well. So obviously the demand is very high. Why? Because of the pollution. So what I'm suggesting to you here is that there are other commodities that are coming onto the market now, which were not really thought about in previous history here. Think about water and think about air now. As the world gets more polluted in these areas, there are going to be a need for new commodities. Very interesting the way this all works. Middle-class families are giving up their dreams of home ownership as soaring costs and a lack of supply price millions out of the property market, according to the Bank of England. This is from the Telegraph website, and what we're looking at here is no different than what we've seen in places like Toronto and Vancouver and other cities around the world. The bank's annual survey of household finances revealed that just under half of all families who don't already own their home believe they will never get on the housing ladder. Oftentimes what happens is people have to move into condos, but the condos are very restricted obviously with their size being put into little tiny boxes. In Manhattan, they call them micro lofts, but really just shoe boxes that people are living in. And they may not need more than that, but it just goes to show you how things have really changed over the years, and Manhattan being one very good example of that. This represents 4.5 million households and compares with 32% who said they were confident of buying. So some people do feel confident, and depends on what they're earning, depends on their savings, depends how much debt they're willing to take on. This also factors in the obvious fact, something that I've talked about so many times before, interest rates. When you have interest rates down at the cheapest they've ever been, you're going to have people borrowing money. Well, with the Federal Reserve raising interest rates that little tiny bit, we could see other central banks around the world do the same thing. So that would obviously put a big damper on the housing market sales. Keep an eye on that as well. The figures, which were buried in the depths of the bank's survey, showed many middle-class families also believe homeownership is out of reach, highlighting the depths of Britain's housing crisis. I do believe that the middle class is going to be out of options soon in these regions where we have very high housing prices. If you look at, just because it's close to home here, Toronto, you have an average price selling at, let's say, $1 million in many of the areas. $1 million is not affordable to the middle class. So you have foreign buyers and you have those in the upper classes. But what we have is really a disintegration of that, and we have more of the lower class and more of the upper class forming, and the middle class basically disappearing, and a lot of people have been renting as a result. In my book, I talked about inflation, hyperinflation, and from Adam Ferguson's book, When Money Dies, he describes how post-World War I Germans were scrambling to get out of marks into any assets they could in order to maintain that value, as the marks were basically quickly losing value. So they bought anything, whatever they could get their hands on, whether it was a house or car or anything, didn't matter. As long as it was physical, it was tangible, they were buying it simply because they knew the money was losing value. Tomorrow it'd be worth less. Let me buy something today, maybe I could trade it for something tomorrow. The same thing is happening right now, but we're still in the primary stages. The worst of the inflation is lurking around the corner. Once again, said it before, I do agree with Mike Maloney in that we will experience first a deflation, a real deflation that is occurring as people simply get wiped off the map in terms of their wealth, their savings. They start pulling money out of the bank. They start using it to buy assets. They basically use it to buy things like food, and what's going to be there to replace it? Well, once it gets to an alarming amount, the central banks will come in and save the day. Of course, in saving the day, they'll destroy the currencies. Right here, I'm talking about Spain, and obviously having a serious unemployment situation. They're referring to one particular individual following his story, but it is for many of these individuals, the youth, but also the adults as well. And what they said is that this individual, he's 18 years old, he's unemployed, not studying and seeking work. That's for nearly 3 in 10 Spanish youth. But the problem gets much worse. Check this out. A key concern for Spanish voters in December 20th general election, in which they're worried about this prime minister here facing a hard-fought battle to retain power. No matter who they get in is not going to be able to fix this problem because of those who control it. Who is responsible for this in the first place? Look at Greece. Look at the credit default swaps. It's the bankers. So this individual is part of a working class neighborhood where unemployment stands at a whopping 37%. So remember that in any nation, if you have a, let's say, 10% unemployment rate, the state or the province or the region that you live in might have a higher or lower rate than the national average. So it's important to note. Of course, the cities, of course, same thing. Compared to a 21% at the national level. For those under the age of 25, the jobless rate surpasses 60%. This is an epidemic that we're seeing not just in Spain, but we're seeing it in Greece, we're seeing it in Italy, and many other countries that I've covered here before. Approximately 62% of Americans have less than $1,000 in their savings account. 21% don't even have a savings account, according to a new survey of 5,000 adults. Okay, so then they go on to say this. They likely don't have cash reserves to cover an emergency and will have to rely on credit, friends, or family, and even their retirement accounts to cover unexpected expenses. Everyone should have some select amount of savings, whether they want to keep it in the bank, not that I suggest that, at least have something. Not even $1,000 is really dangerous. You need to have some money. Now, what if they call a bank holiday? What are you going to do? Is your credit card going to work? Is your debit card going to work? Is your Apple Pay system going to work? How are you going to get what you need, whether it's food, whether it's simple basic supplies, if you don't even have simple savings? You think that your next paycheck is coming in at that week, but what if there is a bank holiday? Are they going to be able to pay you? Absolutely not. Look at the situation in Greece today. Employers don't pay their employees. Let me repeat that again. In Greece today, as it stands, employers do not pay their employees regularly. Yeah, you get 50 euros this week, you get 10 euros next week, maybe you don't get anything the week after, and the money just trickles in. How are you going to feel when you're in that situation? Because we're all going to face it someday unless you're prepared. All right, this right here, we're talking about Russia, we're talking about Africa. And in fact, they are partnering up. Vladimir Putin saying, we are seeing a greater and greater disdain for the basic principles of international law. The United States has overstepped its national borders in every way. Very impressive. The words that come out of this man's mouth sometimes. Sure, we say it here at the Money GPS, but an individual at this level saying things like this, it's quite amazing to read. They are partnering up, Russia, but not just Russia, in fact, China as well. China has a big stake in what's going on in Africa. Overall trade has increased more than tenfold over the past decade or so, with exports jumping from under 950 million to 4 billion. Imports from Africa rising from 350 million to 1.6 billion. So we've seen dramatic increases here. Russia's looking for partners, and Africa is absolutely signing up. Now, the US is partnering with Africa, and they're doing so by invading them, by bombing them, and by taking everything from them. So I see Russia and China diplomatically forming partnerships with certain countries in Africa. And then I see the US going in from, let's say, Middle East and coming down more south, creating any excuse, Boko Haram and all these different factions that are occurring, offshoots of ISIS. Or now, by the way, just in case you're not aware, ISIS has a new name. Don't call it ISIS anymore. It's Daesh. You have to follow along this silly little game that they play. Anyway, very important to note that Russia and China are definitely partnering up with Africa. Polluted nuclear weapon site to become tourist destination. No, this is not comedy. This is actually real. But, of course, they won't be allowed anywhere near the nation's largest collection of toxic radioactive waste. This is how absolutely idiotic things can get when a tourist destination is a nuclear weapon site. Get away from the nuclear, particularly when there's toxicity anywhere near it. They dump all this stuff everywhere. People are exposed to it, and now people are voluntarily going to go to it. This should be not allowed anywhere near where people are. It should be disposed of appropriately. Of course, that never happens. Alright, that's it for this video. I just wanted to say that I do appreciate all the kind words for the previous video that I did about cell phone zombies. No, it is not related to the financial system, but look at the bigger picture. Zoom out. Look at what's happening. How are they able to get away with a system like this? How are they able to print up $16 trillion, give it to their friends and family? Why? Because people are distracted. People are simply completely annihilated by this bread and circus system. Their brains are fried. If you go to this video, look at how many thumbs down there are. Yes, the Money GPS is not about cell phone zombies. It's not about silliness. But it's trying to wake up these people that simply don't understand. It's not just about stock tickers. It's not just about what you see on Bloomberg, what Jim Cramer says, what the 200-day moving average is. Yes, I do cover that stuff. But understand the bigger picture. Do what I call zooming out. Continuously zoom out and see the bigger picture. If you found this video informative, please give me a thumbs up. Last but not least, head over to Amazon, check out this book, The Money GPS. I'm sure you will find it informative. There's actually this look inside feature there, which allows you to flip through the pages of the book and see if you like it. Take care.